we will be putting our ingredients in for the dry ingredients, because we have to mix those up pretty good before we put the liquid in.
Okay.
So we will be doing a double recipe. This calls for 5 cups of dough pep or gluten flour.
This one?
That's it, yeah. So hopefully there's 5 cups there.
When you measure it, do you
Just
just kind of like that?
yeah, and the next one you could have it just be a little bit fuller.
Okay.
No,
A
it's
little bit
okay.
more. So about like that?
Sure, that's good. Okay, and then 1 cup. 2. 3. Enough in there.
Is that too full?
No, 4. No, it's better to have a little full than too empty. Otherwise they get real watery. That's fine. Yeah, that's 5 cups. Okay. Take that bad away so we won't get mixed up with that. And then the next thing it calls for is a cup of oats. And what I have is the quick oats.
Okay.
If you use the regular oats, you might want to put them in your blender for just a few seconds, break them up a little bit. But with the quick oats, it seems to work okay that way.
Okay. So just 1 cup for double?
Yeah, just 1 cup. Double recipe. That's good. And then the next thing it calls for is 2 tablespoons of brewer's yeast. The nutritional yeast, right.
Is either one a tablespoon?
Yes.
Oh.
Just different shapes. Get this out of the okay.
Done?
Yeah, I'll leave that one out because we're going to need some more from the broth. So we'll leave that one out. And the wheat germ, we're going to need a half a cup of wheat germ. I usually use the raw wheat germ. I don't know why, because I think it's better for us.
Rather than, is there a toasted one? Or?
Yes, there is a
okay.
toasted wheat germ. And then this one is Bob's red meal. And then, key parts. We need to season it. And originally I used Lipton's onion soup mix, and I would put 1 package in the dry ingredients and 1 package in the broth. And if you don't have any fear of monosodium glutamate, you know, you can use the Lipton's onion soup mix, but I don't like to use the sodium glutamate. So we try to come up with some other flavorings. And so I've got some imitation beef broth and chicken seasoning.
Can I start to stir this?
Yes, because it needs to be stirred really good. Try to get seasonings that are quite salty, because that's what you need to come through on the steaks, is the saltiness and of course the flavor. And so why don't we put a little bit of these in, and I always like to put garlic powder in. It doesn't call for it, but this is where you can kind of use the things that your favorites for seasoning things.
Okay.
A little bit of onion powder. I don't have to measure it. I just dump some in because it isn't exact. It's just
So
quite a bit, because you know I'm used to
like a
use it.
teaspoon's worth?
Oh
Or
yeah, over half a teaspoon at least. Okay.
I don't know what.
Because when we used to put the onion soup mix in, it was very oniony.
So tell me when to stop.
Put a little bit more in. And a few dashes of garlic. Sorry. have the powder anymore. This is the granules, but yeah, it's probably good. Put more in the broth. So I'll leave these things out here because we're going to need to season our broth pretty much. And this is a beef-like seasoning and a chicken-like seasoning. And that's, okay, that's the beef one. Here's the chicken one. And this is called Bill's Best No Yolk seasoning. But I don't know what it's supposed to be instead of eggs. It's kind of like these other seasonings, maybe a little bit more mild. It's got some soy flour in it, which probably won't hurt anything. But
So the same kind of.
yeah. And then I have another seasoning that I like really well, I think, and it's vegetarian bouillon mix, chicken flavor. This is what Randy
It is
loves
good.
to put in a cup of hot water.
I like this one.
It's
too.
really good, yeah. So go ahead and put a couple of those in. And that's not going to be real salty, but the broth will be real salty, and so that will put the flavor into the steaks that we want. So we probably don't need to put any more than that. I think we've got all the dry ingredients in there now. And just stir that up so it'll be evenly distributed. And then we will getting ready for 5 cups of water. Put it in there all at once and then stir like crazy. You try to get because it absorbs the water immediately, and so it doesn't want to stir real easy. So eventually you'll have to put your hands in there, whoops, and mix the last bit of it.
So should I start stirring while we're pouring?
Well, I think we can pour it all at once,
Oh, okay.
and then go ahead and stir it.
Okay.
First, it seems like it's going to be way too much water.
Yeah, that sucks it up fast.
Yeah, pretty soon you, yeah.
So I'm trying to get.
Maybe we didn't need to put that much water in, huh? If you need to.
Should I just put my hands in? And
Sure.
Okay.
Put your hands in there.
Do you just kind of?
It is pretty watery, isn't it?
How much do you work the dough, or do you?
Oh, it can be worked, doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be worked, but I do it some just to get it mixed real good.
Okay, it looks like it's gotten everything.
Okay. Then you need probably a big cutting board, or you need to put your steaks on, because you're going to need to slice them and drop them in the boiling broth eventually. And I always use parchment paper. The parchment paper just keeps it from soaking into your breadboard. But if you have a plastic breadboard, you wouldn't have to bother with the parchment paper.
Okay, so bring it over.
And then you can, let's see, you need to be able to see. You need to, first you need to do it in half. And if you need a knife to help cut it,
Okay, just.
because we need to make 2 rows.
Okay.
It's kind of hard.
I just.
You can do it that way.
Okay.
Sure. Just estimate. And then try to make it in a, kind of stretch it a little bit and make it in.
Do you want to do this so I can watch how you do it?
No, I like what you're doing.
Do you do it on the
And then
board,
you
or?
can do one here, then you'll have to have another roll over there. So move it a little bit. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
You can make it even longer if you want to, otherwise the steaks get really, really big. Which is okay too if you like big steaks. See, here's some that didn't get the water real good. It doesn't matter. up because they'll still cook up okay. All right, and then you put your other in there. Roll.
So is this the, do you kind of pinch it along, or is that how you?
Yeah, pinch it and pull.
Okay.
Okay. Pinch a little bit and pull at the same time so you get it. And then it won't stay there right away, so you have to keep urging it to stay put. That's good. And then that sits there for a while we get the broth ready.
Okay.
And the broth calls for 28 cups of water for this double batch. And then I'm not going to put as much of the seasonings in this time, but you will be, when you're doing it for the first time, you're going to need to get it quite tasty and
so
salty.
double the amount of what we're going to put in.
Yeah,
you think,
I'll read what the amount is supposed to be, you know,
okay.
which they'll be doing. Here again, it calls for the Lipton's onion soup mix. So we're having to try to get the same flavoring with all of our different seasonings and things, and everybody's got their own favorites, and I'm sure they have a lot of things that they could use. This just happens to be what I have. Let's get that chicken one out again. We're not going to be putting in as much as I'm telling you to put in because I freeze the leftover broth from the steaks. So what's left of this broth I will be putting in the freezer to use again the next time, because that saves you from having to put in just an awful lot of seasonings and things.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So, okay, it calls for 2 teaspoons of celery salt. Okay, so remember the recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of celery salt.
Okay.
We'll put 1. Okay, and then we have 1 teaspoon of, well, 2 teaspoons actually, of onion salt or powder. Yes, you'll need a ½ teaspoon of garlic powder. We'll just do it. If you can go a little over or under. Okay, some of our chicken, it says 1 or 2 tablespoons of chicken seasoning. So how about 1 tablespoon? Then you always want to taste your broth before you put your steaks in, because you want it to be real tasty and quite salty, because the steaks, the dry stuff won't have, you know, much seasonings or salt in. Okay, and that's, go ahead and put some of the other, here's some more chicken seasoning, put a little bit of that in. Okay, so it calls for 1 or 2 tablespoons of chicken seasoning, which she's putting in. And we'll also put some of the beef-like seasoning in.
So I'm putting in about a half.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they can put in a teaspoon of each.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah, it just says 1 or 2 tablespoons of chicken seasoning, but just according to taste. The idea is just to get it a real tasty broth, because the steaks will pick up whatever is in the broth. Okay, yes. Okay, and then, okay, it calls for 1 cup of brewer's yeast or nutritional yeast. 1 cup, yes. Okay, and then the soy sauce. It calls for 1 cup of soy sauce or liquid aminos or soy sauce, whatever. That gives it a really good flavor, and that gives it a lot of the salt that it needs. Okay, and then we'll stir that up good, and we'll turn the heat up on that. is you want this boiling when you drop the steaks in. See what we want to do next to it. You know, if it needs, this way we check if it needs more salt, if it needs more flavoring, or you got that all stirred up good. Yeah, so we just need to test it and see what else to put in there. Tastes pretty salty. To me, I think that'll be good. You'll need to leave your rolls here on the cutting board for about a half hour while you get the broth ready and have it come to a rolling boil, because you don't want to drop your steaks in there until the broth is boiling. So by the time it starts boiling, it will be a half hour, I'm sure. All right, our broth is beginning to boil, so we're going to start slicing the gluten rolls and dropping them into the boiling broth. And they, once you get them all in there, they need to boil for about an hour. And after that hour is up, you can just turn the heat off, put the lid on, and then they need to cool in that broth. So I usually manage to let them sit in there overnight. And then the next morning they're all ready to take out and put in your refrigerator containers. And we're making a double batch of everything now, and you may want to do that if you're fixing for a large group of people, or if you just want steaks for your family for a long time, because you can freeze a number of steaks that you want for a meal, and they freeze really very well. And that way you can have steaks for a long time without going through all this trouble.
I have a question. If we made these, would we be able to eat them tonight? If we didn't
sure.
let them soak overnight, you
Sure.
could just have them cool down.
I've had Mark even take them out of the thing when they're just starting to boil and eating them. But the longer they boil and sit in the broth, the tastier they are. But yes, you can have them right away. So I think we'll start slicing them now and dropping them in the broth. And once you cut off a hunk, you'll want to try to form it in some sort of a steak shape. Or it can be round, and you can do that in your hand like that.
How thick do you cut it?
About like that. What is that, about a half an inch thick, I think?
Looks like.
If you don't flatten them some before you put them in there, then they're just a hunk. Pretty hard to fry them as a steak. So just flatten them out some before you drop them in your broth.
So just gonna mash it like that?
It's difficult to pat them in your hand and make a flat little patty out of them. Then if you have one of these little pizza rollers, you can lay your hunk right down there and then just flatten it out with the roller and put it in your broth. But if you press real hard on there, you'll get them so thin that they'll just kind of fall apart when you put them in there. So anyway, just whatever works best for you. Try different ways. And okay, when slicing for your steaks, you're going to want to slice them about a quarter to a half inch. And then just pick them up in your hand and shape them into a nice little patty or steak. If you don't do that, you'll just have globs of gluten and you won't be able to fry them into nice steaks. So you want to kind of pat them out till they're steak shape. And these need to boil for an hour after you get them all in the pan. That's good.
So just About like that?
Yeah, he's doing a real good job. I'll give you this one. It's not in very good shape.
So if you were to cook half of this and then freeze the others, would you do the same thing? You'd make them into patties and then you'd put them in a container and then freeze them?
Oh.
You'd smash them out first and then...
Oh, I only freeze them when after they're boiled.
Oh, after they're boiled, okay.
When they're all ready, then go ahead and freeze whatever you're not going to use right away. And then they'll just be ready to fry whenever they thaw out. After the broth has come to a kind of a rolling boil, that's when you drop slice your steaks and drop them in there. And then after they're all in there boiling, put your timer on for an hour because they need to boil that long. And then turn the heat off and put the lid on and just let it cool in that kettle. So if you're making it later in the day, you might as well just leave them in there all night, and in the morning you can take them out and try to lay them flat, some kind of a container where you can lay the steaks flat so they'll be much easier for frying. Okay, and Rachel is frying the ones that we made the other day. For the dipping thing, we use the Progresso Italian style breadcrumbs, and then I used sort of equal amount. You don't have to measure it. You put a lot of nutritional yeast in with that, and a small handful of sesame seeds and some garlic powder, and just kind of mix that up. You can push those together, I think, put some more in there. And anyway, we kind of like that dipping thing. You can use whatever you want for dipping the steaks, but that's kind of a tasty one. Very good, and kind of brown them on both sides and enjoy. And remember that you can freeze the ones that you're not using for that meal, and they freeze very nicely. And if you want to put them in smaller packages, so you'll have like a meal's worth in a package frozen by itself, and you don't have to try to break them loose from the big glob of them.
Well, there you have it, Granny Bake Steaks, huh?
Yeah. Enjoy.